Hello, and welcome to Games Past the Prime. This is a show where I take a look at video games to determine if they are past their prime or not. For me to do so, though, there are a couple key categories which I look at. Story, presentation, and gameplay. Then there's a conclusion section at the end where I wrap everything up in a nice little bow. You guys have read the title. You know what game we're playing. Let's take a look at Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. So before I jump into the story of the game, I kind of want to go over my own history with it first. So the first Zelda games I ever played were the ones on the N64, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Now they aren't the only Zelda games I have played, but they are the only ones that I've actually beaten and completed or played a lot of. For example, I have played the first Zelda game and A Link to the Past, but I only played them maybe an hour at most, which, if you know those games, isn't very long. Yes, I know I should play them at some point and beat them, but I just haven't had the time to at this point. Maybe I'll do them for the channel, though. We'll see. However, with that said, I never played a Zelda game that came out after the N64 titles. There are many reasons why, such as losing interest due to me playing a lot more of the kind of COD games and other FPS games such as Halo, but there was one other reason. One other really dumb reason to a lot of people. Once I saw the reveal of the next Zelda game on the GameCube, the one I'm playing here, I thought it looked too cartoonish and looked like it was aimed solely at children. Because of this, I lost all interest in ever playing Wind Waker, and up until recently, I have not played any of this game. Now I realize so many years later that this is just a silly reason to write off a game entirely, so I went into this game with an open mind to see if I was truly missing anything, or if it was worth skipping so long ago. Alright, so for the story, I should clarify where this takes place in the timeline of Zelda games. Wind Waker follows the adult Link timeline after the Hero of Time defeats Ganon and time travels back to his own childhood. A crisis emerges when Ganon ends up returning, but Link does not. Centuries later, the people now live on islands within the Great Sea. The Hero of Time is known as a legend, but his kingdom's fate is unknown. The main character, a young boy, lives on Outset Island, where boys dress in a green tunic like the Hero of Time when they come of age. While the main character is celebrating his birthday and forced to wear this tunic, a gigantic bird drops a pirate named Tetra into Outset Island's forest. The hero ends up rescuing Tetra from monsters, but the bird gets confused and ends up carrying the hero's sister Ariel away. Tetra agrees to help the hero find his sister as they sail to the Forsaken Fortress, where the bird named the Helmarock King has been taking girls with long ears. The hero finds Ariel and other kidnapped girls there, however the Helmarock King captures him and takes him to a man dressed in all black, who orders the bird to throw the hero far into the sea. The hero is rescued by a boat named the King of Red Lions and is taken to Windfall Island. This bird can speak and explains that the bird's master is a returned Ganon, and for the hero to defeat him, he must find the Hero of Time's power, which requires the 3 pearls of the goddesses. The hero finds Din's Pearl on Dragon Roost Island, home of the avian Rudo, which seem to be linked to the Zoro people from the previous games who don't seem to be around any longer. The hero finds Pharaoh's Pearl in Forest Haven, which is home to the Great Deku Tree, and the small plant-like Koroks, who were once the small Kokiri from the previous games. Then the hero finds Nehru's Pearl with the water spirit Jabun on Outset Island. The King of Red Lions then takes the hero to the Tower of the Gods, where he will face many trials before descending beneath the ocean to a castle that is suspended in time. This is where the hero of this story finds the Hero of Time's weapon, the Master Sword. With that weapon in hand, the hero returns to the Forsaken Fortress. Tetra's crew ends up following him and helps him to rescue all of the girls taken. However, at the same time, Ganon easily overpowers the hero and Tetra as the Master Sword has lost its power to repel evil. Ganon ends up recognizing Tetra's Triforce necklace and realizes she is the incarnation of Princess Zelda he has been seeking.
Excuse me, what?
Thankfully, the hero's Rito allies and the dragon Valoo shows up and saves the hero and Tetra from Ganon. The King of Red Lions brings the two of them back to the underwater realm and explains that this realm is actually the legendary kingdom of Hyrule, which the goddesses submerged long ago to contain Ganon while the people of the world fled to the mountaintops, which are now just those small islands. The King of Red Lions also reveals himself to be Daphnis Nohansin Hyrule, the last king of Hyrule, and Tetra is his heir, Zelda, keeper of the Triforce of Wisdom.
Of course!
Tetra remains in the castle of Hyrule while the hero and king journeyed to the two sages who provided the Master Sword its power. They discover Ganon's forces had murdered the original two sages, so the hero must now go out and awaken the new sages whom you have already met through this story. The sages then restore the Master Sword's power, but the king learns that Ganon has actually abandoned his lair, the Forsaken Fortress, and fears that he has gone to that underwater world. He then tells the hero that he must track down the 8 shards of the missing Triforce of Courage, the one that was once kept by the Hero of Time. Once he does so and brings them back to the Tower of Gods, the gods themselves recognize this new hero as the new true hero and is dubbed the Hero of Winds. The hero and the king return to Hyrule to discover that Ganon has indeed gone to Hyrule and captured Tetra. The hero then tracks both of them to Ganon's tower, defeating Ganon's minions once again, and then meeting up with Ganon for the last time. Ganon ends up overcoming the hero and joins all of the pieces of the Triforce together, which will grant whoever touches it a wish. Obviously, Ganon wants to use it to rule the world. Before he can act, however, the King of Hyrule appears and touches the Triforce before Ganon, and wishes that the goddesses not only wash Ganon and Hyrule away, but also that the hero and Tetra may find hope for their own future.
Nice.
At this point, the hero and Tetra team up together and battle Ganon with the Master Sword and the magical light arrows as water pours in around them. With the final blow of the Master Sword dealt directly into Ganon's head, the sword then proceeds to turn him into stone. The hero and Tetra rise back to the surface as the king and all of Hyrule are finally submerged underwater. They are then reunited with their friends, and a post-credits scene shows the heroes sailing off to find a new land to call home. So, I actually really enjoyed this story. I had no idea that the story actually took place directly after Ocarina of Time. I think that is what allowed me to really sink into this game, because as many of you have already known or have watched this channel, that is one of my favorite Zelda games, period. For me, learning about what happened after that game made this so much more enjoyable to play. And don't get me wrong, I did know the loose ends of how the Zelda timeline works, but playing through the story is so much better than hearing about it or reading about it. With that said though, we now need to jump into the presentation. Alright, right away you may notice the very colorful, cartoonish, cel-shaded look to this game. In case you don't know what cel shading is defined as a type of non-photorealistic rendering designed to make 3D computer graphics appear flat by using less shading color. It is often used to mimic the style of a comic book or cartoon and give it a characteristic of a paper-like texture. So I ended up looking up this definition before I called the game colorful and cartoonish cel shading. Because now by saying that, I basically defined cel shading and didn't even actually know it. However, I'm way too lazy to go and rewrite that original sentence to the script, so I'm just going to leave it and look a bit stupid for it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Regardless, this is the main reason it took me so long to get to playing this game. It looked way too much like a 4Kids cartoon, and it really just turned me off. Thankfully, over the course of doing this show, I've been more willing to expand my horizons and play games now that I previously would not have. So with that said, this game is incredibly gorgeous with color and scenery. Every island is pretty unique itself, either due to its shape or its lore and people from that place. It's very fun to sail around to all of the other islands and discover them, though it is a bit of a slow process at times. Something I will go more in depth later. Regardless, the enemy designs are very fun to see, and they are all pretty unique, and there is a large variety of them as well. In this way, the game thankfully doesn't overstay its welcome, and sure, you will run into similar enemies, but because the game isn't incredibly long, you don't really get tired of seeing them all that much. On top of that, the bosses are very interesting to see because if you played Ocarina of Time, you may recognize a couple of names here, such as Goma. However, they have been reimagined, which is very neat.
Hey, stop! Why? I just don't get it. I always catch you fuckers watching this sick shit. This is sickening.
Then, when you finally do get to see Hyrule and its castle, you might not really recognize it at first, which is fine. It's been a long time since the events of Ocarina of Time. However, when you go to get the Master Sword, you may just see those windows with portraits of the sages on them, which again, is just a fun little nod to Ocarina of Time. This was probably some of the most fun for me while I was playing, finding those nods that connect back to Ocarina of Time and being able to say, hey, I remember those people, or hey, I know that from the other game. It's just very interesting and fun to me. Now, let's talk about the sound design, and this was very well done. And I'm not even talking about music yet. You will know when an enemy is close because of the music change, but what I love even more than this is when you hit an enemy, you will get a sound cue, and then when you hit the enemy enough to defeat them, the last sound cue will be different than the previous sounds. Because of this, you quickly pick up on this sound, and it's a great way of telling the player that the enemy has been defeated even before that body has vanished. So very well done here, guys. Alright, now the music. And I do enjoy the music, though I'll admit it becomes a bit repetitive for me, because you will tend to visit some of the same islands over and over again, so you will end up hearing the music a lot. Or you will be out to sea sailing and you will hear that ocean theme a lot as well. So while it does sound very good, I found myself getting bored of listening to it near the end of my playtime. Regardless though, I will play you guys a couple of tracks here that I thought were really good and that I think you might enjoy. The gameplay of Wind Waker is exactly what you would expect it to be. It's an action-adventure game and has quite a few puzzles that range in difficulty. The majority of the game is based around sailing the world and finding the next place that you need to go, and if you happen to be lost, 90% of the time you can either check your map to see where to go, or talk to the King of Red Lions to get a hint at where you need to go. There are quite a few side quests you can also do which can give you various different rewards, though most of the time they end up just being rupees. Now, before I go too far into the gameplay here, I want to talk about the controls. Do note I won't be explaining all of the controls and how each item works, but I will be talking about the basic controls and how they work. Alright, so the controls are very similar to Zelda Ocarina of Time, in that they have a lot of similar ideas, kind of like the if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of mentality. So right away, you will move around with the control stick. Pretty normal controls. But then as you can see, I have these 3 buttons. So I have Y, which will pull out my bow and arrow. Z, which will pull out my hook shot, which by the way is on the top here. And then X, which will pull out my grappling hook. Now, I can actually change these if I press start to open up my inventory, and I can actually press those buttons to change out whatever I see fit. And this is a very similar idea to how the N64 handled items with its controls as well. So if you want a more detailed explanation, go watch that video. Anyways, I can move around with the control stick, and if I press A, he will do rolling, very, very similar again to Ocarina of Time. If I press B, you will see Link will pull out his sword, and I can hit it to swipe, and you can see that it will do kind of a combo, and it kind of depends on how I'm doing it. So you can see if I'm just standing still, he'll do horizontal slashes. If I'm pushing forward, he'll do more of a vertical slashing. So there's a bit of a combo system in a way that you can interact with. It's not something I personally really dealt with much. Most of the time it was locking on and just attacking and mashing the button. Worked pretty well. I'm sure that you could get far more accuracy or far better combos if you planned out things a little bit more accordingly, maybe deal out more damage quicker. But I just found mashing the B button while locked on works pretty well. As for locking on, instead of Z targeting, you actually have L targeting. So as you can see, if I press L, it will sort of lock behind Link here, and then I can move around side to side, forward, backward. Now, if there was an enemy in the room and I pressed that, it would actually lock onto that enemy, and I would be rotating around the enemy, kind of like Z targeting did for Ocarina of Time. Now, as you can see in that upper right-hand corner, R, defend, Link will get down with his shield, and I can actually rotate around to kind of block projectiles, but also in some cases deflect them back in a certain angle, which is very interesting. The D-pad here does nothing, not surprised. And the C stick, if I push it forward, you can see that I kind of in that upper right hand corner, that will put me into first person view. If I push it in any other direction, it will give me free camera, so I can actually use the C stick to control the camera completely. And if I want to lock it again, I just press L, which will go back into targeting and put it behind Link, and the camera will follow him. Really like this. Your A button is basically your interact button. If I approach a door and press A, it'll open it. If I have my weapon out like I do here, I can press A to put it away. I approach a vase, I can lift it up with A, I can throw it with A, I can lift up, and if I'm not moving, I can press R to actually drop it. Stuff like that. So A is kind of your multi-purpose sort of button, while the Y, Z, and X buttons are going to be your item buttons, more or less. And then, like we already talked about, Start will bring up your menu, and you can actually kind of rotate through your items, or if I press R and L, it'll take you to the request status. It'll show you the songs on the ocarina, and as you can see, they have particular movements. So rather than pressing buttons like you did on Ocarina of Time, the Wind Waker allows you to actually press in the direction that you want with the C stick. So just to show that off real quick, since I have the Wind Waker equipped, if I press Y, you'll see he kind of pulls this up. And you can see how kind of the middle is actually the point at where it hits is kind of in a rhythm. So you'll see blank, blank, blank. If I push up, it'll go up, 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 and then I can actually kind of rotate that around to create a song. And if you wanted to know what those would be, you have your Winds Requiem, which allows you to change direction, Ballad of Gales, which is going to be your teleport, Command Melody, which allows you to take control of objects nearby. I only really use this for a particular puzzle, but I'm assuming you can take control of enemies or something like that. I could be wrong, obviously. And then you have the two that you need for the stages. And then finally, the Song of Passing, which allows you to change day to night or night to day. Pretty simple stuff. Pretty simple stuff. Then you have, obviously, your save and options as well. Obviously, not a lot of options, but there you go. And that is pretty much all the controls of the game. It's really very similar to Ocarina of Time, just on a different controller. And I kind of like how they did that, so that you wouldn't be able to pretty much instantly pick up and play this game. Even if you haven't played Ocarina of Time, the controls are pretty simplistic, and they do teach you with a pretty good tutorial. But it's not complicated. It's very easy. Very, very, very easy, and I really, really love it. So, with that said, let's head back to the main script. Alright, now with the controls out of the way, let's talk about some very important things about this game. First, let's talk about the items, and I really love the items in this game. There are a variety of reasons why, but the main one is that each item is heavily used and needed throughout the quest through the game. Too often I find many games end up using items either once or for one very specific purpose, and then that's it. I like how every item here is used very frequently throughout the game. Now there isn't a lot of items like in other Zelda games, but the items here are used quite a bit and aren't one note, which is absolutely fantastic. Now as for the items, you do have some of the classics like the Master Sword and the Mirror Shield. Then you have of course the bow and arrow with the elemental arrows as well as the hook shot. However, they also have the grappling hook, which you get before the hook shot, and allows you to hook onto certain bars and swing across dangerous gaps. Equally, you can also do this and stop swinging to climb up the rope onto the ledge you hooked onto. Then of course there is the Deku Leaf, which has a couple of different uses, such as throwing a large amount of wind at enemies to knock them down, or used on certain things in dungeons to allow platforms to move. Another thing the Deku Leaf allows you to do is if you jump off a ledge and activate it, it allows you to float in the sky. However, do note that this uses magic, and if you run out of magic, you will fall out of the sky. Now, there are plenty of other items in the game, but most of them are needed to beat the game, so there aren't many side quests to find additional items. Now, I did say most of the items are needed. The ones that aren't, you can find or get from side quests, are kind of like the bottles, which you can use to store fairies or other liquids such as water or soup. However, I didn't go out of my way to find any of these bottles, and in fact, I beat the game with actually only one bottle that you get pretty much early on. So I think this is a great place to mention some of the things I didn't like about the game, and unfortunately there are a couple things. So first, the game never really gets all that hard. I didn't go out of my way to get all the heart containers in the game, and really only got the extra hit points from the bosses, and just from that I was able to beat the game. So all in all, the game isn't really difficult, and while it does have a difficulty curve to it, and it does get a little bit more challenging towards the later half of the game, it still really wasn't that bad. Another thing that bothered me is sadly one of the core mechanics of the game, which happens to be the sailing. At first it's neat and fun, but quickly it gets tiring and boring traveling from island to island. Thankfully this is mitigated somewhat due to the use of the unique Wind Waker item. This item allows you to do several things, such as changing the wind direction and helping you sail faster, and also is used for teleporting to different areas on the map. Change night to day and day to night as well. Now, while sailing from one island to the next can be annoying, even with the change in wind direction to help the speed of the boat, thankfully, like I mentioned, you can learn a song that allows you to teleport to different areas on the map. The downside is you can't teleport just anywhere you want. It only has select locations. Now, at the bare minimum, it's nice because it allows you to get close to the area you need to be in, but it's still annoying that you need to sail quite a bit. Now, I know this is just my personal opinion, some people really might like the sailing, but sadly it's just not for me. Another issue I ended up running into that bothered me is once you awaken the sages near the end of the game, before you can travel back to Hyrule to save Zelda, you need to collect the Triforce pieces to make the Triforce of Courage. Neat idea, but there are 8 pieces. Kinda annoying, but okay. So you get a letter from Tingle that has a map that shows locations. Great. This shouldn't take too long at all.
Are you in charge here?
Yes, I
Nope.
am.
Wrong. I'm in charge.
Well, when you go to those areas, you instead find a Triforce map. Each map leads to the piece. But guess what? You can't read the map.
Why? 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 Why?
You instead need to bring the map to Tingle, who looks stupid as shit by the way, and have him decipher the map, which costs you 398 rupees. Why not even 400? What the alright. Anyways, then you get the map to the Triforce piece. Yay! Guess what? Now you have to do it 7 more times.
Fuck you! I hate all of you.
Now, I've complained about padding in games before, but this is pretty bad in my personal opinion. Now, don't get me wrong here. While these are negatives for the game, I think all of the other goods such as the story, and graphics, and music, and sound design, and the dungeons outweigh this tenfold. In fact, I haven't really even talked about the bosses yet. Each one is very unique, and they have their own little puzzles to figure out how to beat them. And I just love that. Each boss is so memorable because of it. However, they do have a classic boss rush at the end of the game, which is a bit tedious in my opinion, but still, I really did love all of the boss fights. They all had their unique little quirks to them. You can't just run up and stab them to win. You had to figure out the patterns to them, kind of like a puzzle. Speaking of puzzles, another thing I did actually enjoy was the treasure maps in general. You'd get these maps which would show you where some treasure was, however the map was very zoomed in, but they all were near some of the islands. Now, on the treasure maps, you only see a piece of the island, but by looking at your own map and seeing that islands you have already visited, you'll be able to figure out where that treasure is. I think this is a very neat idea, and is even very well done. While I didn't enjoy the sailing as much, the one thing that kept me from really disliking it was finding the treasure because it felt like a puzzle that I needed to solve, and when you come to the conclusion on your own, it is very rewarding.
Oh, fuck yeah, this is the shit! Kill me now! Ugh.
Frankly, this game did have things that bothered me, but when you weigh out the differences, I think you might see a pattern. For every bad thing I mentioned that I didn't like, I can mention at least 2 things that I did actually enjoy. Overall, I'm glad that I did play the game, and with that said, I think we need to head into the verdict. The verdict of Legend of Zelda Wind Waker is a game not past its prime. Honestly, while this game is not perfect, I had a lot of fun playing it and seeing the connection it has to Ocarina of Time. There are so many good ideas in this game, and I know some of the complaints I have about the game have already been rectified in the HD remake of the game, so there is that to also consider. With that said though, let's jump into the top 5 reasons why this game is not past its prime. Number 1. The story is very well done, and if you happen to have played Ocarina of Time, seeing that story continued is just, frankly, very awesome. The story isn't confusing, it doesn't deal with any time travel, it's just the pure continuation of what happened in that other game. It's a simple idea, but one that is executed perfectly. Number 2. The graphics, while originally a turnoff for me, slowly kinda grew onto me. While I still love the old style from the N64 games more, I still think this has a good place. It is more cartoonish for sure, but it's very colorful and has plenty of detail to it, which I do love. Number 3. The sound design is so well done in this game. I absolutely love not only the music, but really enjoy the use of sound cues to clue in the players on plenty of things in the combat or encroaching enemies. Number 4. The gameplay as a whole is very enjoyable, especially when in the dungeons. That is easily where I found the most fun. While sailing I didn't enjoy as much as others probably did, I didn't hate it, and this was partially due to the tell song you get as well as the treasure maps. Without these, I think I might have gone insane with how long it can take sometimes to get from one island to the next. Number 5. Then of course, the last and best part of the entire verdict section is that, I just enjoyed playing it. I never got real frustrated with anything in the game, other than sailing sometimes, but that's, whatever. And the action and puzzles are done very well as well. Basically what I'm saying is I liked 90% of what the game had to offer, and the other 10%, while annoying, was not a deal breaker by any means. Frankly, if you happen to be like me, and didn't give this game a chance based on its looks from the past, you need to broaden your horizons and give this game a chance. You will more than likely find yourself enjoying it, even if you don't want to. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did enjoy watching it, please consider subscribing. I upload videos every Sunday. Stay tuned at the end of the video to get a naughty hint at what my next video will be. I hope you all had a fantastic day, and thanks for watching.